What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the format, and I think that we don't even have to wait for the next ban list in order to do this update, because Lightning Overdrive is such a great set that it has brought the format upside down, and I think that even the best deck that we used to have until now is arguably not the best deck anymore, but I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit later. But I think that this format is going to have a lot of variety. I think the decks are really well balanced, at least in the most part. So yeah, I think we're going to enjoy a really good format, and maybe a ban list is going to make it even greater, but until then, this is the decks that you are most likely going to face going into this format. So before we begin with the video, if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the video. So for the top 10 decks, number 10 we have Subterror. So Subterror, I think, is a deck that has stayed in like these low, kind of in the lowest part of the list, but still in the biggest tier of decks because of Dragoon. As long as Dragoon is out, Subterror is going to be the deck that abuses it the best, because it only needs to set a monster, and Red Eyes Fusion doesn't stop you from doing that. And of course, your Hidden City flips face up your Guru, so you search that. So the restriction that Red Eyes Fusion has that pretty much forces any deck to either play Anaconda or don't play Red Eyes Fusion at all, doesn't care. Subterror just doesn't care about it. So it just sets its backer, it summons Dragoon. If it has the Guru play, and that's fine too, but they don't even need that to win. Just the Dragoon with a couple back row and cards like Summon Limit is enough to win games. So this is why Subterror is by far the best stun version of any deck that you can possibly play in a format like this. Number 9, Phantom Knights. So Phantom Knights have been having a recursion recently in order to be a really good deck, because I think that the deck always had potential. It's just that people didn't really think that the deck was good enough, but they're starting to realize that a deck with such a recursive engine, a deck that can grind for ages, and a deck that can be a mid-ranged combo and control deck that doesn't lose to either a card like Lightning Storm or a card that Drag Druid no more, because usually it has something like an Appaloosa, a Beatrice, and maybe a couple Fogblade sets, so it has interruptions of both worlds, so it doesn't really care if your opponent has that one blowout card that would normally kill a deck like Dragon Link, because the Dark Ruler no more is going to destroy a Dragon Link board unless they have the trap as well. So this is why I think Phantom Knights is a very resilient deck, and deck that I think it doesn't have the highest ceiling, so this is why I can't put it higher on the list, but it's a deck that can definitely win a lot of games. So be on the watch out for this deck, because I think people are going to start trying it a lot more, especially when other decks get weakened by the ban list. This deck is not going to get hit unless Dragoon gets hit, which a lot of people play Dragoon in this deck. I think most people play Dragoon. So yeah, we're going to keep seeing that deck. But I think even without Dragoon, even if it gets banned or something like Anaconda Red Eyes Fusion gets hit, I still think the deck is going to be really good, because Phantom Knights are so consistent, they are so powerful, and they can grind infinitely. So I think a deck has the tools to be a really good deck. Number 8, Virtual World. Virtual World, even though Calamities is banned, the deck still has a lot of good plays. We've seen that people who truly like the deck and kept playing it even after Calamities got banned, they have had a lot of success with it. The deck has really good cards. The Trap is an insane card that keeps giving you more advantage and disrupting your opponent, and it has a lot of cards like QB, which they're just moving Floodgate, and the deck has access to a lot of good cards. People have tried the Hand Loop, but that wasn't really the thing that made the deck good, because it was very inconsistent. But the deck can bring out a lot of good cards. It can use Kaliga with Soul King and other cards like the Muddy Mud Dragon in order to go for a stun play, kind of similar to like Calamities, because it can end on a Crystal Wind and a Kaliga on the field, which is basically the same as having a Calamities on the field, because Kaliga only allows your opponent to use one negate, to use one effect, and Crystal Wind is going to negate that effect, so they won't have anything else, and they only have one attack, and you can destroy the monster that's going to attack with a trap card, so you basically don't allow your opponent to activate any monster effects and attacks. So yeah, it's the same thing as having Calamities, but you just have to go for extra steps in order to go for that play, and this is why Virtual World has dropped a lot of tiers, because it was insane when Calamities was out, especially because it could make like 2 Calamities in a single turn, but now you have to work harder for your negates, but it can still make those boards. So this is why I think Virtual World, if you enjoy this deck, you can make it work. So I think a lot of people gave up on it when Calamities got banned, but still many people kept trying it, so I think this deck is really good. Number 7, Eldritch Zoodiac. So Eldritch, I think the more we play, people just don't like Eldritch, because the deck, people start to think that it should have gone hit a long time ago. It never got hit, and the deck just stopped being played more and more the more we went into the formats. And I think it's because a deck like Eldritch, well, yes, it has an engine that keeps replacing every single card that you use. The problem with Eldritch is that standalone, it doesn't do anything. So people combine it with Zoodiac in order to make the most amount of value as an offensive engine, because Eldritch as an offensive engine doesn't offer anything, just an Eldritch effect to send a card on the field to the grave and a 3500 beater. But that's not enough for today's format, so they rely on cards like Dryden and Zeus in order to do the offensive plays, and this is why the best version of Eldritch is by far Eldritch Zoodiac, but still this deck is not as good as it once used to be, because it was definitely tier 1 a couple formats ago, but now it has just dropped down a little bit, but it's still a really good deck, because if this deck gets going, then there's no way you're going to outgrind it no matter what deck you're playing. So the only weakness of this deck is that it gets blown out in a single turn. This can't do anything against that, because usually the deck, what it can do is it can banish a card with Yugioh Era, it can pop a card with Conquistador, and it can pop another card with Trident, so it doesn't have the best kind of interaction as possible. So a deck that, like Dragonlink for example, which is the deck I'm keep referring to because it has been the deck to beat for a long time now, and maybe it still is, or maybe this will change. Stay tuned so you can find out about that. But still, Eldritch is a deck that doesn't have the best way to interact with your opponent, because the interruptions, I think, are kind of mediocre, unless you have someone as Zeus with 6 materials, but then you would have to go second in order to be able to do that, so your opponent will already have a board. But Eldritch, if it gets rolling, then it's an unstoppable deck, and this is why I think people still feel it is an oppressive deck, but to be honest, it isn't. It's still a really, really good deck. Number 6, Prank Kids. So Prank Kids, ever since they got Meow Meow, I think the deck has become broken, because one-card combos, being able to do so much stuff with Prank Kids is absolutely ridiculous, and if you don't stop the first effect, like if you don't ask the first Prank Kid that goes to the grave, or if you don't Skullmeister it, then the deck is just going to spiral out of control. The thing about Prank Kids is that it's very vulnerable to the choke point of that first effect, so I think people should start playing more cards for extenders, because I think people even cut fusion spells just because they don't need them. Yes, you don't need them for the combo, but that's if your combo goes uninterrupted, so I think people should start playing more like the continuous spell that gives tokens, more Pandemoniums, or maybe even polymerizations or invocations, because the deck is very vulnerable to this first effect, and if it gets anything as a hand trap, like Gamma, Ass, Meister, anything, then you're not going to be able to combo unless you have an extender, but just throwing 15 monsters and calling this your deck is not going to be very successful. So this is why I think Prank Kids have just been slowed down a little bit during the latest stages of the format, because people have just been so cocky that their deck is so good with one-card combo that they forgot that this one-card combo can be very easily interrupted, so they started cutting cards that could extend for the combos and for more hand drops or something like that, but still hand drops are not going to stop a lot of things in this format, especially if you're playing against the top tier decks, so I think people should start playing more extenders to make sure that the combo goes off. So this is why I think Prank Kids have dropped a couple tiers. It has probably been a tier 1 deck up until recently, but now I would definitely think that post-Lightning Overdrive, this deck is going to be a tier 2 deck, but if people adapt, if people realize the mistakes that they're making the deck basically less powerful than what it could be, then I think the deck is going to become much, much better if just people adapt to what they should. Now, moving on to the top 5, usually the top 5 for a list like this are the tier 1 decks, and the other 5 from 10 to 6 are the tier 2 decks. So now moving to tier 1, and the first deck I want to talk about is Drytron. So Drytron, yes, it's coming back, and the support it's getting in Lightning Overdrive is absolutely insane. So first of all, the Banner of the Herald basically replaces both the limit of Benten and the ban of Union Carrier. So what this card does is that on its summon, it's going to send a Herald of the Arclight to the graveyard, so it's going to search a Benten. Yes, you will not be able to spam Benten again and again and again for tributing the Drytrons by searching another Benten with another one, but this card replaces the consistency the deck lost when Benten got hit. But the most important thing is that now, without having Union Carrier, Eva was basically a really bad card for the deck, but now with this card, it becomes level 6 when you send Herald of the Arclight, and then you can ritual summon the Benten you send from the grave with Meteonis, because Meteonis is that good, it can summon anything from the grave, and then you go into Beatrice, you send Eva during your own turn to the grave to search, and then with Beatrice during your opponent's turn, you send another Eva to the grave so you can search again. So you get 4 searches with just this card being able to do so much, being a level 6 and being able to send Benten, to send the Arclight to search Benten. So yeah, Drytron, this card is just insane. And if that was not enough, we also got the new Mubeta Fafnir, which is a negate. It's a Foolish Burial for Drytron, and it gives it utility by being able to detach materials for ritual summons instead of tributing them from the field. So yeah, the deck just got so much, and it was a third hit that it got hit when it did, because if it hadn't get hit back then the deck with this support now was going to be absolutely the best deck of the format, but the hits keep it in check, but still those good cards that it got from Lightning Overdrive were enough to pretty much get it back from not being a part of this list at all to being in the top 5 in a tier 1 deck again. So people are going to play Drytrons, so be on the lookout for this deck, you're going to see it a lot. Number 4, Dinosaur. Dinosaur is a deck that just got more support. Scrap Raptor, even though people were excited for Orcust and stuff to be able to play again with Scrap Raptor, I think that Scrap Raptor, what it truly supports is actually Dinosaurs. Scrap Raptor gives you so many options. You can end on so many interruptions now, being able to go into stuff like Appaloosa, Dweller, even Aturia Beast, and of course UTC and Savage Dragon. The deck is a huge combo deck now that always has a follow-up, being able to send Miscellaneous Swords to the grave and not even use the second one and then use it for the following turn, because the deck, once it has Misk in the grave, then you know that even if it has 0 cards in hand, it can do so much during the following turn because you always have a lot of Dinosaurs in the grave. So yeah, what's to say about this deck? The deck can break boards with UCT very, very consistently, and combined with cards Dark Ruler No More, there is no board that this deck cannot break, and it can make insane boards going first, so it's really good going first, it's really good going second, and people love this deck, so you know that this is going to be a huge factor, and you see it more often, because even if a deck is not as good as it should be, when people are really fan of the deck and they really like the deck, they're going to play it more, so you're going to think that it's better than it is. But this deck not only has a huge fan base, but it also is really good now with Scrap Raptor, so you're going to see a lot of it, and I would be prepared for this deck if I wanted to play in a competitive meta scene, because yes, you're going to see a lot of Dinosaurs, especially now. Now for the top 3, the first one is Invoked Shadow. I mean, is there a more consistent deck than this? Then people can argue that Dragon Link is more consistent than this deck, but I think this deck is just the most consistent deck that we've had in recent history. It has so many searchers, it has so many ways to get to at least a part of its combos, and when it does its full combo with Mechaba, with Schism, Fleur de Lis, and Punishment, then there's absolutely nothing you can do. The deck is very similar to Phantom Knights, and I think it's just a better version of Phantom Knights because it doesn't lose to anything particular. So even if you Dark Lure No More the field, then your opponent can just flip Punishment and even wait on Schism, so you have to use Dark Ruler No More beforehand. It has Fleur de Lis in the hand, so even if you get Dark Ruler No More and Harpy's Feather Duster, you can still have an interruption in your hand because Fleur de Lis just stays in your hand. There's nothing your opponent can do about it. So I think the deck is very, very hard to counter when it does its full combo, but even if it doesn't have its full combo, the ability to do at least a part of that combo consistently every single game is what makes this deck insane. And also Alistair being a recursive engine that you can use over and over again, so you can always have a follow-up, is really, really good. And of course, Nadir Servant is such a broken card that it searches you 2 interruptions for just 1 card. So this is why I think this deck is really good. And Winda, I mean, come on, Winda always counters more than half the meta. So when you're playing against something that loses to Winda, then you're most likely guaranteed to win if you go first, unless your opponent has the out. Number 2, Dragon Link. Yes, I'm putting Dragon Link at number 2, and we didn't even have to wait for the ban list for this to happen. I thought we would have, but to be honest, the results from what we're going to get, you're going to see that there is a deck that's actually better than Dragon Link, but Dragon Link is still a really good deck, and I still think it should get hit. But I think the reason for it getting hit is not because it's the best deck, it's because it's just been too good for too long. And Dragon Link is still an insane deck, and now that it has the Dragon Maid engine as well, it makes it less resilient to a card like Dark Ruler No More because it can search a trap as well, so you can have an interruption even after you get Dark Ruler No More or droplet to your field. And Dragon Link is a deck that has the most amount of extenders. This is why I say that putting hand traps in a deck like Prank Kids against a deck like Dragon Link doesn't do much, because you need to see a lot of hand traps in order to be able to deal with this deck, or see any Nibiru and throw it at a certain choke point. But still, Dragon Link usually doesn't care about hand traps, so this is why it's such a good deck. And with cards like Abyss, Heavenly Sphere, Savage, and Dragon Maid Tiding, it can get so many interruptions of the field that your opponent is not going to be able to play. And also it has follow-up with a Chaos Ruler coming back from the grave, and then if they have banished that, they can search something with Brotor when they use Heavenly Sphere's effect. Usually they're searching for Levianir, so you know the deck has good follow-up and destructive follow-up, to be honest, that can OTK you right after the next turn, even if you manage to break most of the board, unless you make a board of your own. So Dragon Link is going to stay a really broken deck as long as LP is around, and to be honest, even if LP just gets hit, the deck is still going to be really good, just not this high in the tier, but still a really, really good deck. Number 1, Tri-Brigade Zoodiac. Oh boy, we didn't need to wait for a new ban list to crown this deck as the best deck, and to be honest, I think it's justified. This deck is so good that the OCG has shown us how good this deck is, and now that we have the link too, people are going to play this deck so much. So first of all, the deck has the Zoodiac engine in order to have a really formidable going second weapon that Zeus is, because when you just have one Zoodiac and just throwing Xyz on top of each other and going for a Zeus with 4 materials, you're just going to blow out your opponent unless they have a lot of negates on the field, and that's just by using one summon. And then the rest of the deck, now that it can search Revolt, it can keep using the monster effects of cards like Ferrijit, of Kid, and Nerval every single turn, on top of getting an interruption with Shuraik while using Revolt. And the best part about this combo is that you chain block Shuraik, and then you can get to banish anything, and it doesn't matter how many negates your opponent has, they are getting something banished, because usually the last thing you do is Ferrijit, because it's the least important effect you want to get out of the effects you get with Revolt. So yeah, I think being able to search Revolt just makes this deck insane, and the fact that it can search Revolt by locking itself into Tri-Brigades and something like that is going to mean that a deck like Bird Up, until the new support for Lilusk is out, people are just not going to play this deck. Maybe they will experiment again after the new cards are out, because the new cards are really, really good, but until then, Tri-Brigade Zoodiac, and it's basically just a Tri-Brigade deck with a very, very small Zoodiac engine. It's just 3 monsters, a barrage, 3 copies of Tanky, but you're playing Tanky anyway because Fractal, and 4 monsters in the extra deck. So yeah, Tri-Brigade, just an insane deck. You're going to see this deck a lot, so be on the lookout for this deck. People in the OCG started playing Mystic Mine in everything in order to counter this deck, so maybe this is what you must start doing too, at least siding it, just to have a chance, because this deck, it starts slow, but it brings a decent board out. But the problem with this deck is that as long as it keeps resolving Revolt, then you're going to lose eventually, because the amount of advantage it gets is absolutely incredible, on top of getting interruptions with Shuraik, and also having cards like Appaloosa, having the Ancient Warrior link that bounces. It has so much. Zeus is an insane card overall, makes this deck so much better. So yeah, be careful for this deck, you're going to see it a lot. So yeah, that's the video, guys. I think that this format is going to be great. We're going to have a lot of variety. Maybe a good ban list is going to level things even more for more rogue decks in order to be able to be playable. So if you prepare for the best decks I mentioned in this list, and you're playing a decent deck, you don't even have to be playing one of the decks I mentioned in this list. You can have a lot of success and a lot of fun, because I think there's nothing unfair in this format. There's nothing like Calamities, Zexal, or something like that that doesn't allow you to play at all. So with a good build and decent deck, you can basically dominate any kind of play style that your opponent might use, even if you're playing against combo, even if you're playing against control. With the right build, you can counter pretty much anything with correct side deck options, and I think that this format is the best if you want to try any rogue decks, because we don't know when the next broken thing is going to get released, because Konami is very unpredictable. There might be a set soon that has a card that's absolutely ridiculous, so I think we should enjoy formats like this as long as possible, because there is never a saying where we're going to put an end to this format and go into a format that's not going to be fun. So yeah, guys, if you have any other thoughts about any other decks that I've missed, if you think that any other deck is going to be much better than I give it credit for, or it's going to be much worse than I say, then comment down below. Let's have a discussion and see what else we can expect for the meta. But honestly, we can expect pretty much anything. I think any deck that is a decent deck can be considered to be a good rogue deck for this format. But still, let's see what we could come up with. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.